second thing is we have a strong regulation, not only to force some of our utilities to use part of the profit to do that, but also to have a cross-subsidy in the tariffs among the different users of consumption of electricity. Then we have part of the bill, electricity bill, goes to this program. We have also, the government funding was very much concentrated in the last mile of the distribution grid, trying to bring the last mile to the consumer. That was the poorest areas in the country. We helped also some decentralized power generation and a program that attends the poorest areas of the country. We involved the families in the financing of the program, and we also use different sources of energy. The result of that is that we include 14 million people in this national grid of energy. 14 million people, 2.8 million families in 7 years. This is a very remarkable result. But more important than that is that those 14 million people bought in this period 2.2 million TV sets, 2.1 million refrigerators, 1.3 million sound systems, 1.1 million blenders, 841,000 fans, 778,000 irons, 1 million transformers, 1.4 million kilometers of cables, 7.2 million electricity poles. We create a very big economic movement towards the poorest consumers of energy. And now we see some very big department stores moving to these areas and giving credit for the people to buy stoves, to buy refrigerators, electrical appliances before the electricity comes, creating also credit for those people. How can we do that in general, to finish? I think we have to take into consideration 6 features. First, the program has to be an incremental cost in the structure, a pre-existing structure. We have to combine different sources of energy and all the best transmission technology that we can have. Second, it's necessary to have a strong regulation. And the strong regulation is going to give transference of part of the income generated from the sector, not only from the utilities, but also from the consumers with higher income. Fourth, we have to involve the community in the discussions. We have to have a participation, and they have to decide how they can pay and how can we adjust the participation in those types of programs. Fifth, the program must have a focus. We cannot have a universal attack on everything. The government must decide where is the best way to put the money and get the best result. And finally, it's necessary to have multiple sources of finance. The poor family has to pay a very small part of the program. The companies must pay. The home appliance and the vendors of home appliance have to pay some parts. The government has to develop some funding. The private sector has to be creating special credit lines for that. And as a combination of those different things, I think that we can meet the target of ending and extinguishing no-access to energy by the target that was defined by the UN.
But there's nothing in your list that no other country couldn't do. I mean, it's really about planning. It wasn't really but because you had these resources particularly. It sounds to me the biggest thing you did was think through the problem and do it in a very planned way.
Yes, well, we have some special features. We are very much a hydroelectric country. We have a national grid that is integrated. We have some special features. You have to adjust this to different countries because the distribution of the poverty in Brazil is in some way more concentrated than give us some particular conditions. But I think that we can generalize the idea that it's possible to using the current resource with mobilizing the different agents to get the best results.
Thank you. Mr. Mestrallet.
Thank you. Well, I would like to say that for a utility, we are a utility. We are producing and distributing power, natural gas, but also water. And being the largest utility in the world, we consider that it is in our duty, in our business also, to try to deal with the problem of giving access to energy to the largest number of the population within the area which is ours.
Did you say you were the largest utility in the world?
Yes.
Really? Bigger than, say, a Chinese utility company? Or?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, we are. We are a little bit.
Yeah, you're big.
By the turnover, by the market capitalization.
Interesting.
Also. Yes. We have 120 billion US dollar of revenue.
Wow.
Therefore, we act in that direction in two ways. First, when we are on the land, we are giving number of countries in the world. We have some experience, and I would like to come back on that. And secondly, because all our employees need to feel proud of what we are doing, and some of them want to be involved in our charities. And I will come back on that because we have launched a special experience called Rassembleur d'énergie. But on the first item, we are present in a large number of countries, and everywhere we try to act in order to have in mind how to try to give access to the population to energy, even when we are only producer. And Mr. Gabriele mentioned the fact that in Brazil, we are the second largest power producer in Brazil after Eletrobras. And we have been building lots of hydroelectric projects. The last one under construction is in Jirau. It's a big one with a total cost of more than $7 billion US dollars. But in connection with the authorities, with Mr. Lula, President Lula came twice to see the project. We have been investing more than 900 million US dollars in social and environmental projects surrounding the dam, in order especially to give access to energy to all the population within the dam, and also giving access to energy to the future inhabitants and workers in the surroundings of the plant. That was one example. I would like to give a second example of what we are doing in Morocco. It's a different kind, because in Casablanca, we are in charge of the producing and distribution of power and water for all the city, which represents 5 million inhabitants. It's the biggest in Morocco. And we have decided to work with the local communities to give access to energy to the population living in the slums. There are lots of slums, like many big cities in the world. And we have had a special social innovative approach. We have been always working, of course, with the backing of the municipality, with local communities, and we have decided to build the grid, the common grid by ourselves, up to some stations, and with collective meters. And after these collective meters, for a block, for example, within the slum, we help the population to build the final, not kilometers, but the final meters up to their house, poor house. And there is for each group of 20 housing, there is one representative, and we bring the electricity to this collective meter, and this representative has to collect the bill for the 20 other people. We install individual meters, but there is only one collective meters with one pay every month. And I can tell you that we are more correctly paid in the slums of Casablanca than in the Champs-Élysées in Paris.
Very interesting. Thank you for that. Mr. Minister Solheim, thank you.
Let me steal 1 minute to take you to the historical city of Timbuktu, northern Mali. A village outside there, it was deep, dark, thick Sahara night, completely dark. Then someone turned on the new solar panels of that village. For the first time, people saw it lightened at night. The happiness of people there. The children being able to read after dark, as the Secretary General spoke about, the possibility of introducing a milking machine, the possibility of keeping medicines cool, all this for the first time. And the pure and simple happiness of the people, and by the way, seen the same in Uttar Pradesh, India, it's absolutely remarkable, and we should bring that to every citizen of this globe. Then how to achieve that? Let me suggest a three-pronged strategy. Number one is simply to echo what the Secretary General said. We should simply establish the right to energy access for all human beings as an universal global human right. We can do it in Rio in June, and I think there should be broad support for that. Everyone understands that establishing the right will not solve the problem, but the human rights of the Millennium Development Goals have had huge impact on global thinking, and establishing that right will have such an impact, possibly as a part of a broader sustainable development goals. Second part of the strategy is policies. We should learn from those nations who have been successful in this regard. Let us learn from Brazil, a remarkably, enormously successful nation in more or less every aspect of the last decade. But let's also learn from the examples from Morocco, which we heard about here. Let's learn from the positive examples. But also importantly, let us avoid the mistakes. And the biggest global mistake on energy is heavy subsidies for fossil fuels.
Why is that?
Some very decent nations are today spending a much bigger amount of money subsidizing fossil fuels than they do on health or education. The president of Nigeria made a very, very brave step to reduce this. We all saw the difficulties he got into. Many leaders have the same difficulty because middle class will feel threatened by this.
Right.
But still, it's the right policies to approach from our perspective. We cannot spend more money subsidizing fossil fuels than on health or education. What's that?
Yeah.
Then the third part of the strategy is mobilizing resources. And the key to mobilizing resources, I think, is to get the relationship between public and private sector right. There is no way we can mobilize sufficient resources for this just by public sector or just by foreign investment or development aid or green development mechanism. There must be a mixture of private and public. And I suggest that the main mechanism should be using public funds, also official development aid from developed nations, as the leveraging mechanism to take out some of the risk premium, but then making the private sector doing the investment per se. And I think we can combine these two in many intelligent ways.
Thank you. Mr. Tanti, you're probably India's leading wind power producer today. How do you see all of this?
I think energy access is the real issue for the India. Even today, 350 million population in India, they don't have access of energy.
How many?
350 million populations.
So almost a third of the country.
Yeah, almost against 1.1 billion. Yeah. So it's a very large population doesn't have access. Why it is not access? It is very simple. Is there most of the people is living in a rural part of India. It's more because India is an agriculture economy and they live there. And the biggest concern is the large infrastructure grid cannot able to go or able to invest on a large investment point of view. So that is the major bottleneck concern is there. What we have done in 1995, we have started the wind energy business in India. And we have identified this opportunity as a business. And the